Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for the verdict.
As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunleavy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, and we have a very interesting show lined up today. As our regular viewers are aware, this is a show where we discuss legal topics that affect Oklahomans. And let me introduce my co-host and one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. And Kent, I'm really looking forward to this one.
It's a very timely topic. We try to make them that way, although a somber topic. Last Wednesday, Wes Lane announced, the new Oklahoma County District Attorney announced that the prosecution of Terry Nichols would go forward on the 160 murder cases that are pending in Oklahoma. As you know, Terry Nichols was convicted in a federal prosecution of 8 deaths and is serving a life without parole term in federal prison now for those. But the thing that's hanging over that is that that conviction is still under scrutiny by the United States Supreme Court, at least in part because of the late production of documents by the FBI in that case. We are pleased to have Wes Lane here today. We're going to be interested to hear what he has to say, having replaced a 20-year district attorney, Bob Macy, although Wes worked with Bob in the office. And what is fascinating to me is that within 60 days of him taking office, he's had to make a decision that I would call a career decision.
Exactly.
I don't think I've made a decision like that in my many years of law practice, and most people won't, and he had to do it very early on, and he did it with courage and with compassion and with a great prosecutorial demeanor. And so I think our viewers are going to look forward to and are going to enjoy meeting Wes Lane today and hearing what he has to say about this subject.
And I think it's fair to say the masses are split on this subject.
Indeed.
Whichever way he went, he was going to make a certain group of people unhappy.
Yeah, the Daily Oklahoman's running a poll right now. You can get on the internet and vote. Are you in favor of this prosecution or are you not? And I checked it, and it's running pretty close to 50-50 at the moment. So yeah, he didn't have a win-win proposition.
We will welcome Wes Lane to the program when we return, and I would expect another lively discussion right here on The Verdict.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am an Allied artist.
It's got to be around here somewhere.
Don't worry, we'll find it. Just calm down.
I swear it was right here on the desk.
All right, if I were a will, where would I be?
It's the only copy. Without it, we're out $3 million.
I know.
Hey, accidents happen. If a condom breaks
Or you have unprotected sex.
You have 72 hours to reduce
your risk of getting pregnant. It's called emergency contraception.
Got questions?
Call Planned Parenthood.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. But sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. And Kent, won't you introduce our guest?
We are really pleased today to have the new Oklahoma County District Attorney, Wes Lane, joining us. Wes, thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
Wes is a graduate of the University of Oklahoma, both undergraduate and law. He has 17 years experience as a prosecutor. He may be the new DA, but he's not a new prosecutor. He's been doing this for many years. He just was designated District Attorney on July 1st of this year. And there's something about Wes that I'd like our viewers to know, because if you watch our public service announcements, you see a lot about children and a lot about abused children and adopted children. Wes has done probably more in that area than any public servant I know of to serve the needs of abused children, of deprived children, and to help children of all kinds. And Wes, that isn't high among the public perception, but I happen to know it, and you're to be commended for it.
You're embarrassing me now. I didn't know you.
Well, that's one of the things we promised to do, is embarrass. Anyway, welcome to the verdict, and just as we get started, I want to point out something to our viewers. This is, I know it's hard to tell, but this is a gag order.
Is that what one looks like?
That's what
I've never seen a gag order before.
It's one that is in place on the Terry Nichols case. And we recognize that you were subject to that, and we're going to do our best to not do anything contrary to the provisions of the gag order. But let me just ask you to comment on the gag order from this standpoint. Wes, do you think in this case, the Oklahoma versus Terry Nichols, that a gag order is appropriate?
Well, I tell you, first of all, of course, as you're well aware, the Code of Professional Responsibility requires and puts limits on the kind of things that lawyers, specifically prosecutors, can say in cases. And the whole purpose of that is we want to make sure, or the writers of the code want to make sure that people get a fair trial. I mean, nobody wants a situation in which the public opinion is so whipped up that verdicts are foregone conclusions. And so in this particular case, it was, of course, done over a year ago. A gag order was put into place in this particular case, and I think that's for good reason. I mean, this is a case in which, and by the way, it's broader than the code requires, and so I think it's a good reason. We want to make sure that Terry Nichols has a fair trial in this state, and so the restrictions in this matter are perfectly fine with us.
Well, I want to change the subject just a minute and bring up something that I think most Oklahomans, including me, did not know much about until very, very recently, and the newspaper has referred to it as the anti-shuttling rule. And I understand there is an anti-shuttling rule, and it has entered into the decision-making process to some extent. We've got a graphic that I'd like to bring up now and ask you to explain to our viewers the anti-shuttling rule.
Well, in a particular case in which you've got let's say a state charge, and this charge is against a federal prisoner, which you would be in federal detention, the question is, of course, you're wanting to get him over into state detention, to be able to prosecute.
So Arrow 1 brings him from federal to state.
Exactly. And so, in theory, if you bring somebody from the federal detention to the state, you do some things, like, for instance, in a particular case, a state, Florida, for instance, brought somebody out of federal detention, had him there briefly, sent him back to the federal detention facility. Well, they were, without having the prisoner's agreement, what happened was the state ended up losing their case forever, because the interstate agreement on detainers requires that there be some, some cautions or precautions taken. And the goal behind it, in theory, at least this is the reason why they did this, is they don't want to just keep shuttling back and forth these prisoners when they are, in theory, some sort of rehabilitative mode. And so if you if you bring somebody in on a detainer and you don't finish your business, finish your trial, whatever it is, and you ship that person back, you will not get him back. Or if you get him back, you will not be able to try him because your case is over.
All right, let's apply it to this case.
Sure.
Terry Nichols was in federal detention. He was brought from federal detention and now sits, I take it, in the Oklahoma County Jail.
Yes, sir.
In state detention.
Yes, sir.
And if he were to be returned to federal detention, in other words, this prosecution be put on hold for some reason and
Right.
he go back to federal detention,
Right.
you would then, under the provisions of this act, at least theoretically, be barred from prosecuting him again.
Absolutely, because the Act requires the case be dismissed with prejudice.
So there's some real exposure in this Terry Nichols case to that kind of jeopardy.
Well, unless, in any case, in the interstate agreement, of course, a defendant can waive his detainer action. In other words, I agree to go back, and you can bring me back, and it won't jeopardize you. But sure, absent in the general sense, them doing that, then you can kiss your case goodbye.
Wes, does public sentiment play a part in the DA's decision? Should it? I mean, in this case, we could argue that maybe it's 50-50 either way. I don't know what the populace would actually decide. But if it were 80-20, and the DA felt it was 80-20, should that sway him to do one thing or another?
Well, justice is justice, and I don't think it's a popularity poll. And so that's the joy of, I guess, getting elected officials. And if the public doesn't like what your district attorney is doing, they have the right to replace them. But I tell you, I firmly believe that if you've got a district attorney who is, putting his finger up, you need to get rid of him.
Well, you've been on the press a lot since Wednesday when you made your announcement. And we have a clip, thanks to the kind auspices of Fox 25 News, which you can see at 9 o'clock every night, some tape of your press conference. And we'd like to show a clip out of this and then ask you to comment on it, please.
For me to simply dismiss this case, simply clinging to a hope that nothing further will ever spring up in its place to place his conviction in jeopardy would, in my opinion, be irresponsible. I will not roll the dice on this issue. There's simply too much at stake.
What do you mean, too much at stake? What was at stake? What was in your mind at that time?
Well, I tell you what was in my mind in writing that segment of that statement. One of the most profound parts of my meeting with family members of victims and survivors was their comment that can I guarantee them that Terry Nichols' federal appellate procedures wouldn't in some way, I guess, backfire from their perspective and maybe give him some time off or let him go free, something like that. And whereas my legal opinion might be that, well, I think that'd be pretty slim, I could not look them in the eye and guarantee these folks that would be what would happen, that not to worry about that. And especially in light of the Timothy McVeigh issues, the federal documents, and all that. So I don't know what looms on the federal horizon.
Well, with the Supreme Court still having an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Let me break in. Hold that thought. We're going to interrupt, get back to the verdict after this short timeout. We're visiting with the new Oklahoma County DA, Wes Lane. What's your verdict?
Yeah, campfire's a lot of fun. You get to make some friends. You get to do some cool stuff. Campfire's for boys too, not just girls. But hey, campfire's definitely for kids. So call the campfire office nearest you to join in on the fun. 'Cause let's face it, you're not getting any younger.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Yesterday was plain awful.
You can say that again. On Broadway is Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company.
Bringing our daughter here was one of the smartest things we've ever done.
I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of confidence. They helped me develop talents I never knew I had.
And it's fun.
On Broadway, Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company. Now enrolling in Edmond. Call 330-CAST. That's 330-2278.
Every day, in state governments throughout the country, crucial decisions are being made that affect the lives of children and their families. But as this process takes place, children are often left voiceless. When these children raise their hands to be heard, is anyone listening? There are people listening. They are child advocates. Join us and raise your hand for kids.
And we're back on The Verdict with the new Oklahoma County DA, Wes Lane. Kent, big press conference this week.
It was a big announcement, big impact on Oklahoma. Wes, the federal prosecution of Terry Nichols had the luxury of moving the trial out of Oklahoma and moving it to Denver. I take it you don't have such a luxury, or the judge, rather, does not have such a luxury on the state prosecution.
Right. The Oklahoma Constitution requires that any crime committed in the state of Oklahoma that is prosecuted in a state court must be tried within the borders of this state. So we don't have to try this in Oklahoma County, for instance. We could agree to a change of venue, and I think it's important that we don't pick our jury pool from Oklahoma County itself, because we want to make sure that we don't. I think that'd just be asking for trouble if upon an appellate review in the event of a conviction. So there are other locations that we could be looking at. I know the trial judges from McAllister. I know there was talk of Tulsa, Lawton, all those different places. I'm not really sure exactly what the issues are concerning the facilities or the appropriateness thereof, but so there's a lot of options.
Well, you spoke of Terry Nichols receiving a fair trial in Oklahoma at your press conference, and I'd like for us to take another clip look at what you said in that regard.
The Oklahoma Constitution demands that a straight trial for a criminal act committed within our borders must be held within this state. We simply do not have the legal luxury of trying this case anywhere but in this state. Oklahomans are a fair and honorable people. I am confident we can find 12 fair-minded people within our state borders.
Wes, fair trial is always a difficult subject with a high-profile prosecution. What kind of questions would a juror have to answer? What kind of questions would a juror be asked in order to be acceptable to sit on the jury?
Well, I really think what you'd see in a voir dire in this kind of case, or any case that's got a lot
of... Now, the voir dire is the questions the jurors are asked.
Exactly,
okay,
exactly. It's that highfalutin foreign term that we use to just simply
Latin,
say, ask some questions. It's actually French. It's voir dire, and voir to see, dire to speak. And I don't know where they came up with that. But anyway, so it's just asking a bunch of nosy questions is what it is. But the kind of questions I think that we'd be expecting to see in something like this would be the impact on individuals personally. Did they know individuals personally that were hurt, or friends, that sort of thing? The bottom line is what the judge is trying to determine, and the parties, is whether or not they believe the individual can be a fair and impartial juror. It does not mean that they're supposed to come in ignorant or unknowledgeable. That is not the issue. It's a fairness and unbiased juror.
Yeah, one can almost make the argument that if a juror said, in Oklahoma, having been here all this time, they never heard of this case.
Oh man, I'd go.
They're not smart enough to serve on the jury.
That's right.
Or they're not telling the truth.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But they don't. So having heard of the case doesn't mean they can't serve.
Correct.
Probably doesn't.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's up to the judge ultimately. But
sure.
And you feel like that a jury can be impaneled in Oklahoma?
Oh, sure. And part of the reasons why, in fact, the case law goes to this, is that the passage of time is a very important element. And I think just by virtue of the fact that the citizens are so split on this in the first place, if I'd be a lot more concerned if you were seeing 90% of the public, by golly, want a trial, you know, that sort of thing. So,
well, you know, they're split on whether or not they want a trial, but I don't think they're at all split on his guilt. I mean, I just don't think the average Oklahoman thinks there's much doubt as to the guilt or innocence of this accused. So,
but you know,
doesn't that play into it?
Well, sure.
I mean, we had a trial, didn't we? I mean, aren't there people that saying, wasn't there a trial already?
Now, which trial? Which question do you want me to answer?
Well,
okay. Right.
Just jump in there.
I know. No, the big issue on this deal is that sure, people know about this, but I tell you, after having tried a lot of jury trials, and you get jurors, and when they take their job on, they take it very seriously. And you better. I've had to try cases several times before, whether mistrials or in fact, one case I had to try three times, in fact, because of hung juries, in fact. And so
that's why they call it law practice.
That's right. That's right. One of these days we'll get it right. So, but the bottom line is these people, these jurors, take their business very seriously, and they're not just going to sit there and swallow what you tell them unexamined.
Well, don't they take an oath?
They do. Ken, I know you've probably talked to jurors many times after cases, and I'm telling you what, they'll let somebody go. And you think about Oklahomans too, and I don't know about you, but we can be a rather hard-headed lot, and I can't see the...
I can see they can be open-minded, but to not have an opinion on his guilt or innocence, I think that's asking a lot.
But that's not the issue. That's not the issue, having an opinion at all. The question is can you be fair-minded and listen to the evidence that is presented to you in court during the course of this trial and consider what's presented? Mm-hmm. If the state fails to give you key pieces of evidence because we just goof up, are you going to convict him because of what you think coming in, or are you going to listen to what was or was not and make a determination based on that?
Well, you make a compelling argument.
Gosh, I hope.
One last clip I'd like to look at, and that responds to the question of why don't we as Oklahomans just let the federal government do it? They've done it once. Why aren't we satisfied with that? Let's look at another clip out of the press conference.
I appreciate the patience of the citizens of Oklahoma, and especially those victimized by the tragedy of the events that took place here on April 19th. Justice demanded I give the matter a thorough review with the benefit of cool reflection. Accountability to the laws of the state of Oklahoma demand we stay the course. That accountability to the laws of the state of Oklahoma cannot be vindicated, again, by a blind reliance upon the federal government or Terry Nichols.
Not going to rely on the feds. We're going to have to do it ourselves.
Right. Well, I think what we need to remember is the federal government, the feds, had a limited jurisdiction. The case that they received, it was an involuntary manslaughter conviction on the deaths of those 8 agents. And there are issues surrounding the fact that if they did have to retry the case, you wouldn't be starting back at a murder case. You'd be starting at an involuntary manslaughter case. And so that's a big difference.
Let me jump in and have you spend 15, 20 seconds kind of summing up your opinion and why you've decided to seek another trial.
Well, there's just a host of things. I mean, you got to keep in mind, too, we're ready for trial today. We're ready to go. For us to stand down right now and to live under the delusion that we'll be able to conjure up all the resources and everything in 5 years is absolute nonsense. It won't happen. We need to go ahead and finish this thing while we're ready. Well, that's my point.
Wes, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We got to wrap it up there. Wes, thanks for coming by. Kent and I'll be back with a final word after this.
Hello, my name is Ted Smith. I'm president of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Disability Law Center. ODLC provides free legal services in civil matters to people with physical and mental disabilities.
I'm Mike Sykes, Vice President of ODLC. For more information, call 1-800-880-7755.
The Oklahoma Disability Law Center provides high-quality legal services to people with physical and mental disabilities.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
Boy Scouts of America, where above all else, character counts.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities. Parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
We're wrapping up another edition of The Verdict. Today we had a conversation with the new Oklahoma County DA, Wes Lane.
Courage. That's the word that pops out to me. If you see our bumpers or our spots in between our segments, we usually have some phrases there. And I, this week, chose quotes about courage. Because I think Wes Lane, without regard to which side you may have come down on that decision, displayed an awful lot of courage that is required of someone in his position. It's not something that he could have avoided. It's not something he shouldn't have done. He did it. But he stood right up to do it, and I think the populace of Oklahoma County can take some comfort in that. I want to thank Krista Brown and Don Schaefer of Fox 25 for making that film available to us, and I want our viewers to tell us, what do you think? Should Terry Nichols be retried or not? Let us know. Look in on our website on www.theverdict.tv and let us know what you think.
And we'll be back next week. This program was brought to you by Crow and Dunlevy, a professional corporation. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.